Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Twilight Zone review. Today it is Season 4, Episode 4, He's Alive, written by Rod Serling and starring Dennis Hopper as Peter Vollmer. And I have to say, whatever one feels about He's Alive, and I would say there would be mixed feelings, sometimes I think it's important to give Twilight Zone credit for not being afraid to tackle some of the issues that it did. In the 60s, television might not have been ready for an episode like this, as this episode was apparently pretty controversial even when it aired back in the day. And if you understand the television landscape of the time period, you can understand why. As for what I think about He's Alive, it's pretty good actually, with one big problem, which I'll get into as we go through the episode. So we start with our main character, Peter, and we find out he's a neo-Nazi, and he's giving a speech. It is very misguided, and you can tell that the people listening are not happy about this, and a fight breaks out. And Peter and his group are just not too popular, obviously, and he's very upset that he can't get through to anyone, and doesn't understand why. So this is a good setup for the rest of our episode. It's an effective scene. And so then we go to Peter, who sees an elderly man, Ernst, and we find out they're friends, but they have very different ways of thinking. Ernst has had a very bad experience, being an elderly gentleman, with this type of thinking in the past, and, he doesn't agree with it. Peter says it's just, a philosophy, an idea, it's a way of thinking, where Ernst feels it has a bad effect on society. And you can tell Peter's really feeling sorry for himself at this point. This whole conversation is just very sad and morbid, honestly, in my opinion. So at this point, Peter's upset. He has no direction. And then he sees a shadowy figure, outside talking to him. And this is where the real problem of the episode comes in. It is very obvious immediately who this shadowy figure is, but the episode hides it like it's some great reveal until the end of the episode. So the shadow just starts giving him all these tips on how to talk to a crowd, how to relate, because he wants the same result that Peter does. So Peter is giving another speech. We cut ahead a little bit, and the speech is still very misguided, but he seems to be slowly starting to win some people over and getting through to some people. And after this performance, he feels like they're building in stature, and he also gets his rent paid for him by the shadowy figure. So Peter's talking to him again, and the shadow says we need to find a martyr, someone who will strengthen our cause that we can use to get the people on our side. Peter's not sure about this, but he ultimately goes along with it. So he has one of his men disposed of, saying, that he was conspiring against us. So this actually works, as Peter gets an even bigger audience at his next speech, and he uses the man, Nick, I believe his name is, who was killed in his speech to gain sympathy with the crowd. He says he died for our cause, somebody did this to him, things like that. And this definitely works. It gets through to people. Playing on people's sympathy always seems to work. Unfortunately, that's just the way things are sometimes. So we have a pretty good conversation between Ernst, the elderly gentleman, and another man. And Ernst says he's seen this before, and we cannot let this spread, so matter what. So Ernst goes and actually interrupts one of Peter's speeches. Peter doesn't want to do anything to the old man because they've known each other a long time, and he considers them friends. So eventually they argue, and Peter does slap him. So you can tell Ernst is pretty much done with Peter at this point, and I can't say that I blame him. So Peter's upset, and he starts yelling at the shadow, in the next scene after his speech, and he tells him to show himself. He says, you're not doing any of the work, it's easy to talk from behind this. And of course, this is the big reveal of the episode, and the shadow reveals himself to be a literal version of Hitler. Now, the problem with this is the episode treats this like it's some big reveal. They play this marching music in the background, and the way they do this is like it's the biggest, greatest twist ever on Twilight Zone, and it's really so obvious. This part was way overdone in my opinion, and I don't think it really helps the episode at all. You could argue that the twist isn't that big of a deal in the episode. That's not the point of it, and I would say that that's true, but I would also counter argue by saying if the twist is not that important, then why is so much focus spent on, making it revealed in such a big way? So Peter basically now knows what's going on. So, Hitler tells him, we've got to expand, we're going to keep going, we're going to do really good, and to do this we have to get rid of people like the old man Ernst, because they're troublemakers, all they do is cause trouble, I know their type. So Peter, of course, is reluctant, but he does go to the place where Ernst lives, and ultimately after they talk, Peter does kill Ernst. And Ernst, his dying words basically just talk about how Peter has no heart. So at this point, Peter's back in his rehearsal hall and he's hearing voices in his head. This guy's definitely deeply disturbed. And all of a sudden, the police come in and tell him, you're charged with killing Nick, who was the man that was killed earlier. Peter runs away and gets shot, and he says they've made a mistake because he was made of steel, but we all know that he wasn't. And then we get the ending narration, which is a little bit preachy, to be honest, and the shadowy figure of who, Hitler, and we get the point, but I'm going to excuse the ending narration a little bit. Sometimes maybe I'm a little bit too hard on Rod Serling's preachiness. Maybe at the time, it was a different time in society, and maybe he felt he needed to hit the message home because the issue's, so important. I'm not going to get on him too hard. I just prefer more subtle endings. We get the point, but it's fine, I guess. The bigger problem with this episode, like I said, is that they spend all this time, making you wonder about this revelation, and it's pretty obvious to us, and you would have thought it would have been obvious to Peter, but I guess not. Just a real problem in the episode there. But I do think the episode is worth watching, and like I said, this was before social media, and the fact that this episode drew so many letters and got people talking so much it's a tribute to the power of the episode, and the episode still has some power and makes you think. So overall, I give He's Alive a 3 out of 5. An episode worth watching at least once. It's not the easiest, most entertaining thing to watch, but it is important. So 3 out of 5 for He's Alive, and as always, thank you very much for watching.